So, interesting day working on the Glasair 2, trying to figure out what's going on with the nose gear. As a recap, the nose gear retracts fine when the emergency gas strut is not installed, but when you install the emergency gas strut, it doesn't want to seem to play along with the rest of the gear legs. It hangs up for some reason. So we're investigating a lot of different things and looking at each component, each pivot point, each operation, trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And essentially this is how the cylinder is installed in the airplane, if this is forward and this is aft. And so one of the things we found out was that when the gas strut, the emergency gas strut, was removed and you cycled the gear, the over center didn't actually go over center. It just came up shy. And I'm going to put a picture on showing you what it looked like following the video. But we thought, why is that not going over center? That should go over center. That should be no problem. So what we eventually found out was that this hydraulic actuator was completely incorrect in the way it was set up. So the way it was set up was that the piston was bottomed here in the extended position, which this is the extended position when everything's pulled together. This was actually too short. And by being too short center to center, it didn't pull the over center completely over center. Not only that, but the tab on the drag link and the tab that's on the nose gear, where these two things hook up, when the actuation takes place and this starts pushing outwards, these go in different directions. So the nose gear goes this way, the tab on the nose gear goes that, and the drag link goes this way. And what happens is there's a momentary position where they actually get closer together. And so what was happening was, as it attempted to retract, it was even putting more force on this, trying to squish it, but it couldn't squish anymore because it was already bottomed out. Now, as most of you are familiar with, when you rig the landing gear, this, and I've kind of got some of this all pulled apart still, but you put the gear in the up position and you bring this so that it bottoms out, and that, when it bottoms out in this direction, that sets the stop. That's the hard stop for your gear up. So this wasn't even close. As a matter of fact, this cylinder is complete. While it does have the ports facing each other, just like the manual says, the problem was this shaft was much too long. So it was, the nose gear was coming up into the well, hitting the bottom of the well, and this thing still had 1 1/16 inch movement available to it. But then when you retracted, when you extended the gear and everything shrank down, it bottomed here before the over center actually went over center, and it created a little bump as it tried to go back and forth. So, and to top that off, where the back end screws onto the cylinder here, when this was longer than it is now, and the piston bottomed out, there was actually some drag, a high amount of drag right here. So the hydraulics were powerful enough to push it through that drag and back and forth when the gas strut was not on. But when the gas strut was attached, I think it all added up to too much drag. So what we figured out was that when you're in the retracted position, those two tabs are spread apart from each other, one on the nose gear, one on the drag link, and they're 12 in this particular airplane, and they should be consistent from Glasair 2 to Glasair 2, considering that they're engine mount related. But that's 12 7/16 of an inch center to center. So when we looked at the length of this rod, it was far longer and it bottomed out too soon. So I put it on the lathe and cut it down. We took 1 1/16 inch off and then rethreaded and put it all back together. So the collapsed length needs to be 9 inches plus or minus a little bit for adjustment, and the extended needs to be 12 7/16 plus or minus a little bit for adjustment. And what that does now that I've changed this length of this piston rod, the piston no longer ends up bottomed out over here. It's up 1 1/16 inch. So you have a bigger chamber of fluid in there and that kind of thing, but it doesn't bottom out here. Of course, it bottoms out, so to speak, on the over center link. That's your mechanical stop there. And then, of course, you've got 800 pounds of hydraulic pressure holding it down along with the gas strut. So we think that by making some of these changes and rigging this properly, this should help our cause and get this nose gear to work properly. If it doesn't, we've really come up against an idea that we're not really sure how to fix it next. But once I get us all put back together tomorrow morning at the shop, we'll see how it works and get the air out of the lines, that kind of thing. But it was this airplane had 608 hours on it when I got it. Now I did get it as a project, and it did have several years ago a nose gear failure, and I certainly have to wonder if this is how it was rigged for somebody, if that didn't cause nose gear failure. But it was rigged completely backwards, meaning it wasn't a hard stop up here for the retract position. It was a hard stop down here for the extended gear extension position. And not only was it a hard stop here, but it was actually still too short and created a slight bind as those two tabs turned away from each other. So hopefully we'll get this thing all straightened out and get it working. But that kind of answers a whole bunch of questions there.